you're finally here. You finally arrived. You've at last found the one place which holds the answers to the questions of the ages. You're excited. Your heart palpitates. Is it real? Can it be true? You're understandably hesitant, yet determinedly hopeful. That is good. Your faith in such matters will be rewarded. You'll not find pat and cliched answers here. No! Here is a place of clarity, of definition, of explanation, of truth. Here combines science and religion, removes tradition and replaces it with fact. Here the universe is holographic, yet tangible, ethereal, yet substantive. Here is a place where time is understood as atemporal. Here there is harmony amidst chaos. Here is where the darkened glass is finally cleared. Here is where you'll find the answers to all the unanswered questions which stretch across the cosmos.
And you are across the cosmos for the next hour. I am Chase Rockwell, and I am your host. I am joined once again in studio by my co-hosts,
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson.
We resume where we left off last time with the Nephilim. Exactly what are the Nephilim? Are they a hybrid species, half human, half angelic? Are they what we call Neanderthal man? While paleontologists, anthropologists would scoff at such a notion, with the startling realization that one of the bones in the skeleton of Richard Leakey's Lucy having turned out to have been a bone from a baboon, can we really rely on anthropologists to explain everything? Or are they simply discovering what fits an agenda? Paleontologists, anthropologists like to make much of the fact that while the Neanderthal brain capacity, or skull capacity, was larger than the average humans, that wasn't necessarily an indication of greater intelligence. It is a hypocritical position for them to take because the metric applied to everything else that they do in paleontology holds true except in this one particular instance. The average size of a Neanderthal brain is about 1,600 centimeters, whereas the average cranial size of an average human is about 1,400 centimeters. There is a larger brain in Neanderthal rather than in the human. So, what happened to them? If they were smarter, if they were stronger, and their skeletons certainly prove the fact that whatever these beings were, they were powerfully, massively powerfully built, and evidently smarter. Yet, they no longer exist, and human beings exist in droves. How could the lowly human being displace this massively powerful being? Well, take for example the fact that perhaps Neanderthal wasn't a part of the evolutionary ladder at all, but is in fact the Nephilim, a being solely the result of intercourse between these angelic, or rather if you prefer, spiritual entities, and corporeal human females. It's a fantastical notion, I agree. However, ancient writings clearly indicate that this is what took place. And not just biblical writings. The Bible, interestingly enough, gives scant attention to this. No, where we are getting our information is primarily from the Deuterocanonical book of Enoch and ancient Grecian and Sumerian writings. Legend, lore, filled with titans, demigods, etc. You can't dismiss everything as fanciful tales told by a primitive people. Stories have to have a grain of truth for them to have any traction whatsoever. That they've been embellished, I have no doubt. That they are made up out of whole cloth, I patently reject. The Nephilim is a hybrid being, and we have evidence of their having been on this earth in their purer form all about us. We simply reject it because it doesn't fit the secular narrative. Now, you can call that narrow-minded all you want, but if you step back and look at the naked evidence, the Nephilim or the Neanderthal were discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany in 1854, and it was quite a while before those who discovered it figured out what it was they had. As a result of this fantastical discovery, there were a lot of hoaxes perpetrated in the time between 1854, 1860, thereabouts, and turn of the century, the 19th century, the 20th. One of those hoaxes was Piltdown Man, a completely contrived step in the evolutionary ladder, which was soon found out, but not soon enough. And paleontologists, archaeologists had a lot of egg on their face because this hoax lasted for approximately 50 years. So I'm loath to always take paleontologists' word on everything they say, and you should be too. It is a new science. They don't have it all figured out, and as the recent baboon vertebrae in Lucy has proved, even in 2015, these people are prone to mistakes. When you shape everything to fit a particular preconceived narrative, you are going to have error creep in. There is no way around it. Now, you don't have to buy into the Nephilim theory. Most people don't. But to dismiss it out of hand as paleontologists do, archaeologists do, and Christianity does, that's telling. This one subject has been able to marry two sides who are sworn enemies of one another, but they can both agree on this. Neither believe that the Nephilim ever walked this earth. They just simply don't have an answer for what these Neanderthal man remains actually point to. Are we afraid? Are we afraid of our true origins? Are we afraid of what actually has occurred? Probably. Fear of the unknown drives people to do stupid things. And we've done them. But when you sit back and you contemplate, if the Nephilim truly were here, then they must still be here in some form or fashion. Geneticists have proved, primarily through the Human Genome Project, that there is Neanderthal blood in a lot of humans, because these beings and Homo sapien not only lived together, but they cohabitated. There was a shared community, if you will. Who dominated whom? Through paleontology, we don't know. What we do know through the extra-canonical scriptures is that the Nephilim came, they ruled absolute, and with a firm hand, and their human cousins came to revere them as the heroes of old, the men of renown. So that would lead one to believe that the Nephilim were astute enough, intelligent enough to realize you cannot brutalize your human captives and expect them to respect you, to hold you in some sort of reverence. History is written by the victors. And because of the circumstances surrounding the Noahic flood and simple dilution through the gene pool of having no pure Nephilim to marry or breed with, their line was diluted. Now, if you fast forward many, many, many years to exactly what it was that the Nazis were trying to do with resurrecting the Aryan race, this starts to make a little bit more sense. Through eugenics, they were breeding to arrive at a dominant genetic profile in a particular human being they believed would resurrect the Aryan people. Well, who were the Aryan people? Extremely ancient titans, demagogues. I call them a breed of Nephilim. A lot of this is in my book series. It's a fictionalized account. You're more than welcome to read it. You can find it as the God Principle series on Amazon.com. I do suggest you pick up some copies to read. Not very expensive, and you'll learn a lot, and it'll be entertaining besides. However, this isn't just a commercial for me and what I've written. It is to make one aware of what's coming. There is going to be a cosmological shift in our natural order as we segue into a one-world government, which I know is coming. Ask yourself this: who will be running that one-world government? And if it is, as it says in the Bible, that the end times will be as in the days of Noah, well, what were the last days of Noah like? It was a world dominated by the Nephilim. And was only this flood, this destruction of their known world, that for the most part excised this entity, this creation, from their midst. Didn't completely remove it, but blunted it and removed it as the power that it had been. Well, it is my belief, and I outline this in my book series, that this is where we're headed to again. Thus, let us resume with our discussion on the Nephilim, and pick up with my co-host Mark Wilson as we discuss how the church feels about this.
Well, church teaches that God wanted to keep the people pure of sin.
Sin isn't, that's stupid. First off, sin
because
is a line of demarcation.
Because Messiah would eventually come through that particular line.
That
of
I have
people.
no problem with.
Right.
Okay? Uncorrupted, but that's not sin. That is a genetic corruption, which is a different situation altogether.
Now, there's a woman that lived in the walls of Jericho.
Yes, she did.
Rahab.
Rahab the prostitute.
Well,
Yeah, we were always listening to
specifically
Rahab the prostitute.
to throw a complete curveball into that idea.
Of the sin and corrupt, or sin part.
The sin part was that Rahab was chosen specifically, and people don't realize what she was. The walls
They realize
that
what she
surrounded the city weren't walls like we look out and see a 2-foot huge wall. These were large walls with rooms in them, and they had little apartment houses, and the guards would live up there, and they did guard duty. They wanted something to do in the evenings
They'd
at
be
times.
more analogous to the Great Walls of China.
Right, and so her job was as a temple prostitute. I mean, a wall prostitute.
A wall prostitute.
Was she got
What do you do for a living? I'm a wall
prostitute.
Hey, she had to make her living somehow.
That's what she did, and she was taken care of. She had her own place. She had a terrace she can walk around on.
Her own place was in the wall.
Her own place was in the wall with a window. Oh, huge, great view way up there.
Yes.
But what people don't realize is Messiah came through her. Came through her.
They realize it, but they
overwatch it.
explain around it. Well, she wasn't really a prostitute. She was more entitled than indeed.
No.
And, blah, blah. Yeah,
They slap the whitewash on it and try to hide it.
It was all about, and her
prostitute
faith.
meant something different back then. It's like being an accountant today.
Yeah, right.
The whole issue that we were shown through the Most High it was an issue of faith. It's all about faith.
From our perspective. But from their perspective, and they, in this context, would be, for instance, these celestial ambassadors, these watchers, and even, to a degree, the Nephilim offspring. And these were all different personality perspectives that I had to tackle when writing this book. What would be their motivation? And, not to keep trumpeting this, but I had this scene in my book where essentially the Nephilim are grown up now, and they're talking to their father, the Watcher fathers, and there's this situation of, why the hell should we follow you? What do we need you for?
Right.
We're strong, and the humans fear us. We got it all. And there was this point of vexation, which you can see in historical lore. If readers of Greek mythology have learned nothing, is that these internecine battles that went on between the children and the parents.
Right.
Why do we suddenly think this is all mythology? None of it ever happened. When we've got this specter of the Neanderthal skeleton that, if for no other reason, should cause every anthropologist to stop and go, you know what, this just doesn't fit. Larger brain case,
But they're
much
more
stronger. The more we dig, we find they had a language. They used tools.
They would have
intermarried
dominated over
They would
humans.
have kicked human beings' asses.
Yeah.
There's no other way you could. How can you possibly?
They would be
come
faster,
to some other conclusion.
much faster,
So much for survival
much
of the fittest.
stronger. I mean, we're talking like probably my estimate is 5 to 10 times the strength of a normal human.
And that's how I wrote them in my book.
They would also be superior intellectually,
And they
to
became
the
the
point.
heroes of old, the men of renown. You know what their weakness was for me? The one weakness that I had to put in, because there always has to be a weakness.
Ego.
Exactly. Pride and ego. When you don't have any natural predators, what happens to you?
Right.
You become sloppy, you become lazy, you become
Eventually, but you're pretty smart, so you don't
but
dip down there too often.
no, I'm not. I'm talking about
But
that.
you do, because you think yourself so superior.
Let me share something with
like,
you.
for instance, my main character, Haiwa, was so prideful that it was that very pride that led him to let his guard down, and he got killed.
Okay, again, I go back to this. Neil Tyson.
That's Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes, fantastic scientist. I have some. We all have issues,
but a poor actor. I watched him last night on The Big Bang Theory, and he's a poor.
Anyway, the point is that he said something that was really interesting. I'm sure he believes in evolution, but they were talking about the difference between a human and an ape. What is the genetic difference? And they find it somewhere between 1% and 2%.
You know what? That quote is
No,
not
that
his.
has been scientifically proven to be a mistake.
Well, even if it is, let's just say it's a couple percentage points.
It's about 5.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is, he says, with that tiny difference, we've sent men to the moon.
Exactly.
We've built computers. We've built cities. We've done so many spectacular things that an ape hasn't, all from that tiny little increase in brain power. Now, when you take something like the Neanderthal and you look at the brain capacity, how many cc's compared to the humans, and you look at the way the skull's designed, the ability to have larger frontal lobes, how much smarter would they be? And we don't look at it like, for instance, when you have an engine and you have a 50cc Honda, okay, and you have a 70cc Honda, it's got a little more kick, a little more power, a little bit more. The difference with the brain is it's exponential. It doesn't just have a little bit more. Look at Einstein compared to a normal average human. He was a pretty good scientist, deep thinker. There's been a lot of people like him.
You don't even have to go to Einstein. You can go to an autistic savant. Their brains are shut off in most basic areas.
Right.
But the brain ability... Sorry. The ability of the brain that is used, they do wondrous things with it. There was this one autistic savant who could hear a musical piece played on the piano once.
Right.
And could replay it note for note, though he had no idea. He was blind, but he could hear and he could replicate. And imagine... Now, a lot of neurologists say they can do that because their brain is freed up from all this other stuff.
Probably.
But I understand what you're saying. The capacity with this added computing ability, if you will, like a computer.
We're taught today
massive.
that they were pretty stupid.
Well, but that's conjecture.
No,
again,
because when they find Neanderthal remains, like in Europe, and they find a group where a group lived, they come up with they were hunter gatherers, a little bit of hunters, mostly gatherers, and they pretty much died out. And there's nothing down there to show they were any more superior than a human. Actually, they look stupider in many ways.
Do you know why? Here was the conclusion that I came to in my book, because I did have to tackle this. So, like I said, this is a lot of what we're going to talk today does delve back to my book, because that's how I did all my research. Once the flood concluded, obviously there weren't as many left as there were prior to the flood. Flood drowned them. Drowned a lot of them.
Yeah.
Okay? But unlike what's taught in Christology, I believe that there was more than one ark. I believe there were several arks all over the world, built by all different kingdoms and empires, because this flood was prophesied all around the world for the better part of 600 years. It wasn't just this last-minute thing, Bill Cosby and Noah and all that BS. This was a long prophesied flood. So I do believe that there were multiple arks built, and that some of these arks contain nothing but these giants, these titans.
So
these
what you're
Nephilim.
saying is the Bible is one story.
Genesis is one tribe's oral version written down through Jethro of Midian.
Through Moses.
Of Midian.
Well, he's the one who told it to.
He told it to Moses, and Moses wrote it down. But what about, Fred of Gazanga, 1,000 miles away? You don't think he's got a story too?
Well, Christians believe they cornered the market, and everybody on earth was destroyed except for Noah and his sons and their wives.
Well, that's asinine. Thor Heyerdahl, back in the 1940s, like 48, sailed a small little skiff, tried to sail it from mainland into the islands of the Marshall Islands to see if migration could have been possible. Because there was this question of how do you populate the world if we all came from just one area? Mm-hmm. And it took him approximately 4 months. It was a harrowing journey. He barely survived. But he and his compatriots finally did get across. They'd landed. And, the conclusion was, theoretically it's possible under the best of conditions, but not really tenable. But because he made it, the voyage of the Kon-Tiki proved that migration in that respect is possible. And then, of course, when you have the Ice Age situation in antiquity, of course, we have this ice land bridge that allowed people from Asia to migrate over to the Americas over this ice bridge.
Or what about the tip of Africa down to...
Well, it's the same difference. And so they make all these contrivances to show how humanity migrated over, hundreds of thousands of years. It just... Would not it have been better if these arcs all landed in different places?
Well, yeah. Well, here's the question. We know through tectonics that the Earth was at one time one large landmass.
Well, all right, you're talking about Pangea.
Yes.
But Pangea, as is understood by, I don't even know what science this would be. Archaeology? No, anthropology? Not anthropology. Geology, maybe. Is that there was a super island surrounded by water.
Correct.
Because all of the continents fit together. Dr. Walter Brown, who is, I believe, a mechanical engineer by training, is PhD, conjectured a theory called the hydroplate theory.
Correct.
Whereupon the hydroplate theory stipulates that the majority of the Earth's surface was land. That there were large inland seas, lakes, rivers, etc., but there were no really high mountains, maybe nothing over 3,000 feet in height, most. And even those were rare. That for the most part, the topography of the Earth was largely flat.
And different than what we have today.
Subtropical because there was this canopy that surrounded the whole Earth. And there was no precipitation in the means that we understand precipitation today, rain, snow, etc. It was more or less like a dew that would fall in the nighttime.
Cooling temperatures in the air, warming land.
And that was enough with the greenhouse environment that this canopy created to make sure that everything stayed temperate climate between 72, 80 some odd degrees.
Probably a fairly high humidity.
Extremely high humidity.
We were probably looking like Florida.
But there was enough to make the entire world a lush garden. And I guarantee you, if they do some core sampling, some drilling in Antarctica, they're going to find that it was a subtropical climate there. And how do you come up with that? Oh, well, the Earth tipped on its axis. Okay, you know what? Give me a friggin' break. Every time you come up with a reasonable solution, they contrive something that's absolutely nonsensical.
That's logical.
I'll take the Earth tipped on its axis because I can go to the Chinese folklore in the Stone Age. It said a giant flood hit the Earth so badly it knocked the Earth off of its pillars or its axis.
What they're saying is that at that time, that Antarctica would have been at the equator.
I know what they're saying.
Okay, well,
they have to, Chase, and the reason...
God bless America.
You have to edit that out. They have to because they have a premise. They have their theory. And whatever comes along, whatever tidal wave comes along, it has to withstand the theory. If it doesn't, they have to look for alternate ways to either eliminate that wave or to bolster up their theory that can withstand that wave.
I'm going to use an example here that doesn't pertain to exactly what we're talking about, but it's a prime example in another abstract. And I've talked with you guys a little bit about him. There was a scientist, an astrologer, astrophysicist named Fred Hoyle. He hated the idea of the Big Bang Theory. He is the man that gave the name to the theory, the Big Bang Theory. It was derogatory. He hated it because he said there has to be a creation at one point. And so he had come up with what was known at the time the steady state theory, meaning that the entire universe existed all the time, it always has, and it always will. Now, he fought tooth and nail against the Big Bang, even though science shifted away from his theory. He fought till his dying day for his theory. So, this basically, now we have science shifting away from the Big Bang Theory because they're running into a lot of problems that they can't solve. We've had the Big Bang Theory for almost 100 years. And they just keep crashing into one big problem, and they don't know how to get around it. So we're starting to look at other theories again. But we'll have people like Stephen Hawking who will fight to his death for his theory.
Right.
And in the same aspect, this is the same thing that happens with archaeology. It's the same thing that happens with geology. Yeah. We come up with these theories, and then the guy that comes up with it and his group of followers will fight to the death instead of saying, wow, everything I thought was wrong.
We're going to find that out about our universe. There's no question. All of our ideas of how it came into being are wrong. That's not even a question mark. It's kind of like with quantum physics. They have to bolster up their theory or change it a little bit in order to make it still a viable theory. Much like wave function collapse and consciousness, they can't figure out how to fix that problem.
So they just change it.
They change it, and they also introduced an old theory called the pilot wave theory. It's on the physical level, which they can wrap their heads around, and so everybody's starting to jump onto that, but they realize that's not going to hold very long either. It doesn't work. But in regards to what we're talking about in the flood, and different arcs, you were saying that it happened with different people groups. We want to say in Christianity that no, there's
One ark.
God, one God, one ark. 3 people plus wives were saved. That's it. Everybody in the whole earth was destroyed, and every human on earth came through Noah and his sons. They sired the rest of the. You have to say they sired the entire population on this earth. The problem is when you dig into anthropology and you dig into geology, when those two meet, you find there's a disconnect. There's a huge problem.
It's not a tenable theory whatsoever. If you can place the flood at approximately 6,000 years ago or so, not even that, 5,000 years ago,
it would have to be about. Methuselah died at 969 years, and it came on the day the year he died. After he died, so we're his removed from how many generations? We're talking like 1,400 years after Adam. So
somewhere in that neighborhood.
You're right. You're in the high 4s or right around 5,000.
Okay. When you see the disparity in the ethnic makeup of this earth, where they've been, how long they've been in places that they've been, it just doesn't. It doesn't pair out.
This is where Christianity has to wake up and be a little bit more logical. Even though they say I'm standing on my faith, when in China you're saying that everything they say regarding their history is a lie. You're saying that
because most people regard them as nothing more than savages.
Right. You're saying, well, no, you guys didn't exist for 5,000 years because the ark only came around 4,800 years ago. Whatever. And then Ham, Shem, and
here's where we run
had to zip out there, make families, and eventually they get to China. So you can't be any older than maybe 3,000 years old.
But if you consider, that if we're going back that far, that the Christians don't believe necessarily in an ice age, because, of course,
they believe that was the flood.
The world didn't exist then. How are you accounting for how these people got there? I mean, seriously, how did they get there?
Fast sex.
No, that's a reasonable question to ask. If I'm going to hammer on the secular community for what I believe are outright lies and contrivances to save their little behinds, then the same's got to be said for the Christian community.
They don't think that deep.
Well, I don't care if they don't think that deep. Then resign your position as pastor, and
it's easier not to think that deep.
For whom?
for them, for the rest. It's real simple just to come in, sing songs, spend a half hour singing some songs and feeling like you're caught up in the Spirit, and then listen to the 20-minute sermon, and then go on your way.
20-minute sermon. What church do you go to?
Well, maybe 40-minute. But realistically, they're not too deep, and they stay in a very small, little, narrow courtyard. What they speak on, redundantly. But they never apply it to
tithe. We got to pay the light bill.
They never really take the Bible and apply it to the world and hold it up to the scrutiny of all the different disciplines of science. It's really easy to do, and there's a way to do this, but it takes some learning.
I believe that, but
I don't find science a enemy. Well, here's the problem.
Not at all.
The church.
Wait, hold on. Pure science isn't the enemy. However, the purveyors, the caretakers of science are sometimes outright thieves.
I agree.
Crooks, criminals. They're every bit as bad as the good old time religion fundamentalist pastor behind the pulpit. They lie to your face because they have no clue what's going on and they don't want you to know it. So they call you the idiot. And let me tell you something. You will always know you're winning an argument when somebody calls you an F.
Look.
What's an F?
Fuck you! You know damn well what an F is. I'm trying to keep this show somewhat clean.
PG.
Look, with me, anytime I get into any type of debate, the moment it becomes a personal attack, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about.
Fuck you!
The moment that is broached, that is an automatic admittance to the other side saying, I just lost. And they're trying to hide it.
But I want to know from a Christian pastor how these people got all over the earth. If we're only going back, I'll be generous, 5,000 years.
Even the Catholic Church has pretty much ceded to the point that evolution played a part in our existence. And they're saying that, God could have used evolution in order to create humanity, slow cooking. So how do you do it? Is it the fast microwave? Zip, there's Adam on the ground there. Zip, there's Eve on the ground. And then you let the biology take over. Or was it the slow cook? You have to make it from scratch, and you let the earth kind of simmer and boil for a while. And
stir the primordial ooze a little bit.
Let it go on, and then he directs it and introduces certain things at certain times.
But isn't every introduction a false additive?
Is what?
Wouldn't every introduction that he places a false additive?
No, that would be the cry of an average scientist because they look at upward causation. They're saying, take a look at Stephen Hawking. He says there's no need for a God. Well, there's no need for a God because he's not the most brilliant guy in quantum physics. He's brilliant in his levels. And they say he's one of the best at black holes. And he's a good thinker. He's not a great philosopher. But when you say that there's no need for a God, you better darn well be really well versed in every aspect of every science
that
there is.
You know that those people have their little niche places. Be it Neil deGrasse Tyson, Hawking, even Dawkins or Hitchens. On the other side, he's
a cantankerous, crabby,
a tremendous amount because it really is not their forte. They don't want to go through all these little dusty books that you and I have read because they're just boring to them. They'll claim they have, and they may have glossed through it, but I guarantee you that Dawkins or Neil deGrasse Tyson or even Hawking hasn't gone through Enoch the way I've gone through it.
They dismiss it. You
take any
scientist. A wealth of information.
This is the bomb I'll drop on science right now. I don't care what the discipline is, if it's geology, anthropology. I don't care if it's astrophysics. I don't care if it's any type of physics within any type of science. Whatever you're going to name it. I don't care if it's biology. It all starts with one thing. You know what that one thing is?
Once upon a time.
No, once upon a time. It starts with wave function collapse. It starts with what turns what we would call energy into matter.
Okay, well, that's
where it begins. And
from your perspective, they're trying to blot that out now.
For instance, evolution is simply something we look at and we take it from the start of let's call it primordial soup. You take it from the start
cesspool.
cesspool.
The primordial ooze.
Or a combination of a couple of elements come together, and then you go, aha, there's a simple-celled organisms.
But
organism.
wait a minute.
And that primordial ooze was in France, according to Star Trek: The Next
Wait a
Generation.
minute. We got to start right here. Okay, we just created a single-cell organism.
Right.
Right? Now, let's get into the complexity of that single-cell organism.
It's beyond anything we could create
wait
with
a
our
minute.
minds today.
Wait a minute.
You don't know what you're talking about. Just a combining of simple amino acids. And
Well, that's the exact thing I wanted to hit.
You know,
we're
Mr.
talking-
Mr.
this-
Gray Matter.
No, this single-cell organism requires proteins. For a protein molecule, we need 26 amino acids for them to be lined up properly to make a protein.
Yeah, but if you give anything enough time, hell,
Okay.
you can build a 747.
To do this, now we need to start with the math of 26 times 26 to the 26th power, and then 25 times 25 to the 26th power. We go all the way from 26 down to 1 times 1 to the 26th power. We total up that whole number, and that is the amount of chances it would take to make one protein molecule.
Now we're staying on gross physical matter, which is really simplistic, by the way. Okay, biology is very simplistic. So you go into what causes mitosis.
Exactly.
Come on now, what causes mitosis? What causes an equal
well,
size?
either they divide or they explode.
Okay, what they divide. Where
take
does
your-
the energy come to create two of the exact same size?
Well, it eats a lot.
Each what?
Protein.
They, you know, as smart as science thinks, they don't even know what causes mitosis or why it
No.
happens, or why does 2 go to 4 and 4 go to 8? Why does it double like that? How could it possibly double its size? Where does it get the energy to do that? And how does it?
Where does it get the programming to do that?
Okay. Now we're on gross matter, but the bigger point is how in the world did the components for that first cell materialize from energy state? People like to say, "Oh, let's forget that." You know, there's proteins, there's amino acids. Screw that. Where did the amino acids come from?
Exactly.
Where did the proteins come from? Where did they come? How did they
Well,
materialize?
All of the
Where did the
basic
carbon come from?
elements are all here.
Nah, you got to take.
All right, but you have to go back to the Big Bang. Then you have to go back to before the Big Bang.
If you go
the
to this-
the elements are all here. When you're getting into like amino acids and what have you that create life, yeah, we all will return back to the elements from which we came. The trick is how are these elements being constructed into something that we would call sentient life?
Right.
You
mean consciousness?
Well, even consciousness, okay,
Yeah.
but not sentient. I mean, animate life is more what I wanted to say. Even that is a huge, huge, huge leap, and I understand that there is a large segment of the population out there that does not want to acknowledge the fact that there is life beyond their visual
Spectrum.
yeah.
Comprehension. Understanding.
And so they bring things down to their level, and so they're playing fast and loose with a lot of facts.
We anthropomorphize even our own universe.
Oh, we have to.
Yeah.
It's the only way we can understand it.
And so, you know, getting back to the Nephilim for a moment, we've got evidence here. I know that the prospect scares some people, but on the flip side, and this is another place I wanted to go to with this, was I earnestly believe that these beings are still with us.
UFOs.
Well,
They're
not just-
coming.
Not just
I can
UFOs.
hear it. I can feel it.
I am of the mind that, you know, and I've got to go back to my book series because it's all in my book series. That, yeah, we're quick to like jump on shadow governments like the Illuminati, for example. Who is behind the Illuminati? Who are these people? Why do they have so much power? What is the point of this power? You know, you can conjecture all you want, but even the most jaded of us have to look at, for example, the present situation of our government and think, something's going on here. I mean, this guy isn't doing everything on his own. He's.
You mean the guy that came out of nowhere and took the presidency away from Hillary?
Yeah, it just there's a mindset behind him and what he's doing that, quite frankly, just.
So what you're saying is that the Nephilim are among us, but they're just hidden.
What I'm saying is my conjecturing is that, yes, the Nephilim are here, that this is the paradigm shift that we're headed towards. Christology, Orthodox Christianity, believes that at some point soon we are going to lapse into what is called the 7-year tribulation.
Like the last days of Noah.
There will be this rapture of the Christians. They will all vanish from the earth. And interestingly enough, this is going to be mostly from Western countries because, hell, if you're not in a Western country and you're a Christian, you're screwed.
I personally think God's going to use a shop vac and just...
So, all right, the rapture will happen. The 7-year tribulation will either begin, or the 7-year tribulation will begin and the rapture will happen at the 3.5-year point. Ugh. And please don't even ask me.
That's mid-trib. There's pre-trib, mid-trib, and then there's post-trib.
So
you stick around till it's all done.
We will have this tribulation
if you're lucky enough to survive.
At the conclusion of which Christ comes back and sets up a millennial kingdom, and everything is pretty much. Everything's pretty much wrecked to hell down here, isn't it?
Yeah,
we got 1,000 years.
There's not much left of the earth by then.
All right, but this is typical Christian think of the end of the age. We're going to go through this really, really horrible period, the mark of the beast, the rise of the Antichrist, etc., etc., etc. And Antichrist is going to be an actual physical presence being represented in a man, who I guess is something along the lines of a used car salesman. I'm not really sure yet, but a really good used car salesman.
I can tell you what I think,
but I don't think that's what's going to happen at all.
Well, considering the mark of the beast was 616 in some scripts, and
mark, yeah,
and some of them it's 666, and one of them equals Nero Caesar, and then the other one equals who followed Nero?
No, 616 is a Latin translation, and 666 is a Hebrew translation of Nero Caesar.
What's the Greek translation?
I don't know if there was a Greek translation.
The Greeks, Romans had that game. They loved that game.
I'd have to look it up
as well.
But I have it all written down.
But the writer of the Apocalypse could not be talking about.
He's talking about Nero.
Could not be talking about a ruler that was barbecuing Christians.
What I'm getting from this is that because we have got in Christianity this end game already written out, and that's what we're looking for. That's what we're going towards. That's the race. We're going towards this thing. We have completely been distracted from what's actually going on, and so we allow it to happen because in our pea brains, we think that it's hastening this tribulation period.
So that's why we have these idiots trying to recreate the red heifer so the Jews can start...
Yeah, create the red heifer, create battle in Israel, the Armageddon, the whole bit. What I see instead is a paradigm shift coming along, in much the same way that there was a paradigm shift between the Old Covenant and the New. When the flood occurred, if you are a believer that there was this great worldwide flood, we went from being a world ruled by these Nephilim beings, these heroes of old, men of renown, who by that time, after 600 some odd years, had come to be, regarded favorably by the people. They weren't just murderous bastards the whole time. You can't be a murderous bastard and be regarded highly by the people that you serve or who serve you.
Right.
So while I believe that initially they were brutish and thuggish, over time, especially with their people, they became almost demigods. And they were looked upon as such.
Well, that's the term. The term demigod came meaning part. You're the offspring of, so you're half, 50%.
But even when you look at the pages of Scripture, in Genesis 4, who calls them the hero of old, or Genesis 6, verse 4.
The sons of God,
heroes of old, men of renown. You're looking at the Bible itself even regarding these beings as as good, as highly regarded, as highly respected, even though you look into Enoch, and Enoch says that these are the guys that were laid waste, and they are what we regard now as demonic entities on the planet.
Right. Can I bring in the UFO thing for a minute? Because what that does is it kind of brings everybody onto the same table. When you say Nephilim, and you say angels, and you say God, all of a sudden there's a lot of people that just leave the table. I don't believe in that. They walk away. When you mention UFOs, alien agenda, hybridization, on the table comes a bunch of scientists.
Or kooks.
Kooks too, lots of kooks. But the point is that it's all of a sudden you can have the religious with the non-religious, the scientists with the non-scientists sitting on the same table believing the same thing. It's just they change the labels. Like if you say the word angel and the other person says the word alien, they're both accepted. Just the vernacular is different.
Well, but both terms connote a different imagery.
Not really. Well, both are alien. For instance, the word angel just simply means all we know. We don't know what their names are. They have names. All we know.
Some of them do.
Yeah, but en masse, we don't know what they are. We say they're an angel. That's like, okay, you're a messenger of God. Okay, or you were a messenger of God.
Angel is a very
it's just a
inadequate term.
It just means messenger.
Right.
What we're talking
For instance,
about.
here's a funny conundrum. It says Michael and his angels battled the devil or the dragon and his angels. Now, wait a second. How can the dragon have angels? Because the word angel means messenger of God. Unless he's a god.
Exactly.
He'd have to be a god. People don't get that. So when it says the devil and his angels, it simply means the war in heaven. It simply means the devil had ambassadors or messengers. Well, we don't know their names again.
Underlings.
Yes.
Well, underlings really puts them down to a real
No, but
low
consider
level.
this. If we've got celestial entity, an agency, let's say, is pointed out in Acts, is pointed out in Jude, these beings are called celestial beings. And they're
And what's
placed
celestial mean?
at
As opposed to terrestrial. Celestial means...
Right, on top of that, we have Michael the Archangel. We have Gabriel, Archangel.
But what's
we
the
have
word
cherubims.
celestial mean?
It means of
From the heavens.
the vast expense, the heavens, something
Wait a second.
otherworldly, beyond this place. It's not grounded to
Well,
the
we
earth.
have the celestial, and we have
the stars, the universe.
terrestrial.
Yes, of Earth.
Correct.
Okay, so the celestial beings they're denoted that way for a reason.
Because they're of this. I mean, literally would be of the skies or of space, but
The exact same connotation is given to the Egyptian gods that came down from above. The exact same
there's
connotation
that thread of
was
continuity
given to
again.
the very first grouping of people that we call the beginning of the modern age, which was the Sumerian culture and the Anunnaki. Sky gods, Indian
Yes.
legends, sky gods who came down 50% taller, that intermingled with humans and produced, in every one of the, quote, legends or myths, produced offspring that were powerful, intelligent, wise,
Struck fear into
mighty
them.
deeds, and also ruled with iron hands because they had the power. So the term Nephilim, when you take it out of the Bible and you put it on the table, you can get a scientist easily to believe it if you simply say alien. Because everyone would have to believe in the concept of an alien.
Okay, not all scientists subscribe to aliens.
I don't know of any scientist who doesn't allow for the possibility of an alien.
No, they'll allow for it in theory, but
true
they
scientists
won't
will-
admit to it
Right.
in fact.
Yeah, true scientists will allow for
Then
alien,
what's our
they'll
SETI
allow
project?
for God.
Well,
What
that's been my question repeatedly. What the hell are you listening for
What
out there if you don't think they
And
exist?
why do we have a project going on right now that costs billions of dollars to look for planets? We would call them M-class planets in Star Trek, but planets that are possibly could inhabit life.
the
in the
life
Goldilocks
I
zone.
think that they are looking for is
It's humanoid.
far below. No, I think that if they were to find another race, if they were truly to find another race of beings on par with us or higher, they'd be scared to death. Because every time you have had a mightier society find a lesser society. It's never worked out well for the lesser society.
Never, right. That's where the
always
movies
get their
V
ass
came
kicked.
from. Yeah.
Right.
So, on one hand, you got to wonder about the logic or the rationality of these people going around, poking a beehive with a stick, if they really think that there's bees out there.
The UFO following in regards to what we would call and term as Nephilim, regarding the angels that have fallen and they have taken human women and created offspring. The hybridization program in the UFOlogy is that these aliens come down and they take women and sometimes men and they experiment on them. Sometimes they will actually introduce into their womb a sperm from an alien, let them carry the child for a while, then take them back to their ship and remove the child. And they're trying to create a program by which they look almost identical to humans with an agenda to incorporate themselves into the human population without anybody knowing it, and alongside humans actually rule. And there are those within ufology that believe that right now a lot of our key government officials are actually hybrid beings.
Yes, I've heard that about the British royal family, that they are reptilians.
Well, they are kind of snakish.
I'm trying to think of some of the others that I've heard.
Now, I don't get into any of this. I'm just doing the research so I can comport myself in a way that I understand them and we can talk. But I have to tell the people out there, this is what's going on, and there's a lot of deadly, serious, well-positioned people that believe this. Now, when you take this and set that on the table and say, okay, in the moon landings with NASA, with our United States Air Force, with the Russian Air Force, with the Canadian Air Force, with the European Air Forces, all admit that they've come into contact with UFOs.
But UFO, again, is this generic term
with craft
that doesn't necessarily,
let's put it this way,
give definition to anything in particular.
With craft that defies their ability to keep up with, to turn with, and even to classify. They have no idea what the propulsion is or how it works. They have no idea how they can make starts and stops and turns in such a way that would, if a human was on the inside of that craft, be smashed to jelly.
Not even that, but the craft itself wouldn't be able to retain the stresses of the physics.
And now I would say
unless it wasn't really there, it was just a holographic image.
There's two potentials. One is that it is holographic, or two, that it's coming out of a different dimension into our dimension, as opposed to coming from deep space. Because deep space, in the craft size, they're far too small, regardless of what we could possibly conceive. They're far too small to contain enough supplies and energy for the journey to the nearest star system.
Yeah.
So therefore,
unless you can travel to the nearest star system at a very, very high rate of speed.
That's why Star Trek created the warp drive. Because it's just and today they say, we're working on warp. No. They had to create it because it solved the problem that aliens are just simply too far away. So you create a system, a propulsion system, that can get you there to here in a way that we never could dream of. Because even the speed of light, man, can you imagine going to the next star system at the speed of light, supposedly, or right near it? Take years. And then years to get back. It's like
hundreds of years,
crazy.
Thousands of years.
So that leaves us still with the situation of the Nephilim here and now on terra firma. Are they here? Were they ever here? Are we missing the boat completely?
Going back to Genesis chapter 6, I have to eliminate the sons of Seth theory because it doesn't hold any weight when you look at it critically. It simply doesn't. On its own, or when you attach other different writings to it, such as the Book of Enoch, such as the Book of Jasher, such as other historical writings from different countries.
Well, not only that, but the Sons of Seth theory didn't even come about till right around the time of Constantine.
It also doesn't really exist. You have to kind of think it up first and make it fit. What you have to say is that, God's not that out of control. He wouldn't let that happen. It's called their God principle in their mind.
Sure.
Exactly.
And so then they say, well, how can we solve this problem? Who who are these sons of God? Well, if you take the term and look at the original Hebrew language, you come up at Ben Elohim and you find a word that fits. You have to go to Job. And if you go to Job, you're stuck because it says, wow, they were angels and they went up to present themselves to the Most High. Now we're in trouble. But we all know at this table that the Bible wasn't written in Hebrew, although we always like to go back to
the Torah wasn't written in Hebrew.
The original Torah.
Well, the original first writing was not in Hebrew. It wasn't in Hebrew for hundreds of years. So we could have lost something in the translation, too.
For our listeners, the simple fact is it could not be. The first Torah, the Moses writing down that whole Exodus, the Hebrew language didn't start for another 400 to 600 years after that
the
fact.
The Torah is just the first 5 books. Subsequent books that comprise the Old Testament were written in various languages over the years. Some of them were Hebrew, but for the most part they were written in whatever language that was native to the individual at the time, irrespective of their lineage. Did Daniel write in Babylonian or did he write in Hebrew? Because he was in exile at the time that he wrote the book.
Right.
So,
he wrote in the language he knew.
I suppose that's neither here nor there. Where I'm getting to with the whole situation with the Nephilim, are they here? Are they not here? When I was doing the research for my book, I learned a few things. One of them was this holy marriage that goes back to ancient Greek antiquity, and the term for the holy marriage is hieros gamos. And it is literally the wedding of the mortal with the immortal. Typically a male spiritual figure with a female human figure. And of course, this is a common theme in Greek mythology, what have you. But it is an old practice which predates even the Greek Empire. What I found interesting is that the hieros gamos exists today, and this is something that's interesting to me. There is a almost like a brokerage house for international law, and they do a lot of work with the United States Navy and the Defense Department, and this brokerage is called the hieros gamos. And when I first discovered this several years ago, it was kind of a matter of fantasy meeting reality, because I had already done enough study on this holy wedding to understand its implications and its connotations. And even to this day, it is interesting to me how we've got this almost like this international law firm working with high levels of the United States government, named after a holy wedding that weds the mortal with the immortal. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
Well, we got professional football teams that take names like,
of every name you're going to use.
Well, it's just
okay.
I'm just taking this
I
position
I get it.
It could be just like a cool name, hieros gamos or gamos, however you say it, that kind of is cool to have your company have it. Now, the question I have is, what does it consist of, and who are they, and what do they do?
Well, that wasn't easy for me to figure out. Even then, the whole situation with them dealing, first off, with international law, secondly, with the United States Navy and the Defense Department was interesting to me, because I know that it then places them in high levels of government. People may regard me as part of the kook brigade, but I do believe that there are shadow governments on this planet. I do believe that there are a limited number of players, irrespective of how many sovereign countries we have on this planet. And I think that there are things going on behind the scenes and people with real control that we're not even close to understanding as the normal run-of-the-mill everyday person.
Do you know anything about them?
Of the hieros gamos?
Yeah.
Yeah, just that they broker in international law.
How do you broker in law?
Well,
sell it to the highest bidder?
I hate to go down this road because I didn't really research this
Okay.
aspect of it.
We can walk away.
And I wanted to come back to it later. I just wanted to raise the specter now because I figured the show was going to be something we would hit on again because it is a
Without a doubt.
Where it was bringing me to is this paradigm shift I'm talking about. When the antediluvian world came crashing down with the flood, it changed everything. As much as it changed it beforehand, it changed it again. We went from a world literally run by these beings to not. Essentially starting over in little pockets all over the globe and having to rebuild societies. And these societies mirrored, I suppose, to a lesser degree, whoever was in charge afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
We're familiar to a point with Noah's account, but even with Noah's account, we find not too long afterwards the Tower of Babel. And the gods freaking out over that because things were being learned too fast. Knowledge was being acquired too quickly. It was enough to scare them that they had to disperse the crowd. And so they did.
Right. Christianity teaches what?
Well, what about that particular incident?
About the Tower of Babel.
Oh, I've heard
They
so
would
many
become
different
like
things.
us. Those are the words used
Yeah,
in the Old or in the.
But they hammer on the idea that
Well, there was just one God, and they were getting evil again. It's kind of like really this soon after the flood, they're that evil again. Come on, man.
No, it's kind of funny. You read the story. It's kind of like it's. I hate to say it, it's like they picture God walking along, and there's Jesus next to him, and there's the Holy Spirit hovering.
Yeah,
Kinda
all
like
three
this.
walking along.
They're all three walking along, and they observe this, and they said, "Hey, if we let this continue, they're going to become just like us." So what we'll do is we'll go down and confuse their language, and of course it'll stop being built,
Right.
and they all went their different ways, and that's the end of it. And so that's what we're taught as little kids. But when we're adults, we're taught the same story. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. You know, how in the world could we become like them? And I listen to pastors say, "Well, that's allegorically speaking." Oh yeah, and but I look at why would he be worried about us becoming like him? I like the idea better that it's ambassadorial agencies that want control over humans and want to keep them isolated from each other.
Even when we start getting into the New Testament, Paul makes it clear that this world doesn't belong to us.
We want it to be, but it doesn't.
They're
want
all
it.
over the friggin' world.
Mm-hmm.
This is their website. They're international. They're all over the world.
You're speaking of the Hyros.
The Hyros Gamos law firm. It's
How many
HG.org. Hyros Gamos. They're literally all over the world.
So what Chase is saying is that these could be the infiltration of the Nephilim into the network
of
our world's
I have
government.
No doubt. Hyros Gamos Law Brokerage was founded in 1995, which is about 8 years after I first discovered them.
Whoa.
And it's not an old thing. It's exactly that. It's almost like a legal, a law brokerage firm. And if you understand that they are all over in the highest levels of not just our government, but worldwide governments.
Sneaky.
Well, but this just brings you to the readers of the God Principle book series understand exactly where I'm going with all of this because it's there, and I think it happens to be something that's real. And if this broadcast disappears from your podcast, you'll know that I was probably right.
Well, come net
Little
neutrality.
Alex Jones for
Yes. Net neutrality might all be taken away.
Speaking of
there is a paradigm shift that is coming, and I believe the paradigm shift is going to mirror that which initially took us into the era, or the age rather, of the Nephilim rule, which was whatever rule occurred.
Is that what it means
before,
at the days of, as it was in the days of Noah?
Well, I believe that upon I wanted to leave this for a different show because it's a whole different thing. We all have our own thoughts about what the end of the age is going to be. The end of the age is just that, an age. This age is coming to an end, but it doesn't mean that the world is going to come to an end. This age is certainly going to come to an end because there is a shift in how we are going to be on this planet, who we're going to be ruled by, what we're going to be forced to do, what we'll accept freely to do. It's a shift in thought. It's a shift in life. It's a shift in how we see the world around us. It'll be as foreign to us today as if we were to step back into the antediluvian time and realize that you're living in a something beyond even a theocracy, that you are living at the good pleasure of a king with massive, massive power, both physically, intellectually, but also because he gives his subjects what he wants, and he rules absolute. There's no court of appeals.
Yet there's bread and circuses,
Well,
just like in Rome. Keep them occupied with entertainment.
yes, but when you're dealing with
Well,
an
they're mobs.
entirely different mindset altogether, and this is what I think that Rome failed to accomplish and why it eventually fell. It's where I think we are being ushered like cattle down the, what do they call those little
Shoots.
I guess, to the slaughter. We don't even realize it. We're just going along with the crowd because that's where it's going. Well, this is a paradigm shift that I don't think is a possibility. I think it's an inevitability. It's going to happen. And this will set up this new government. This will not just like a new United States or anything. I mean a new
World
order completely dissimilar to anything that we're familiar with today.
It's an inevitability.
It is an inevitability. And it's going to be a new order, and it's
Mr.
going
Anderson.
to do away with what we regard as the society we're familiar with. Now, there's still going to be basic things that need to be done. You still have to eat. You still have to have a job, etc. Those things will not change. But I believe that who's here, who is regarded as high or as purposeful, all these things are going to change. And as a Christian, I firmly believe that we will be the ones with the bullseyes on our behinds. Absolutely no doubt, because we will know the truth, and we could shatter the illusion that is going to be contrived. That's being contrived.
Christians,
And it starts out with little word games, like when you've got ISIS being regarded as ISIL. One little stupid little letter, but what does that one little letter mean? It
A world of
delegitimizes
difference.
Israel, because it calls that entire land of which Israel has a part
by whom?
by Muslims.
Who else said that about him?
But Barack Obama only refers to ISIS as ISIL. So he calls it the Islamic State of Israel, or Iraq and the Levant, rather than Iraq and Syria, who are the ones that are perpetrating it. Or he won't even call it the Islamic State, which is what the Islamic State refers to themselves now.
Yeah, they just
It's a
call
little
it
wordplay. The other one we discussed last week with ISIS. We were discussing ISIS. It's the difference between radical and fundamentalist.
Right.
We understand radical to mean one thing. They understand it to mean something completely else because we refuse to click into their mindset. We're being led down this chute to our own destruction. Well, the same thing is happening here with this paradigm shift that I think is coming with respect to the Nephilim. Yeah, I do believe that they never left us. The scriptures certainly seem to indicate that they are still here with us.
That does.
When you see an Adolf Hitler trying to, through eugenics, create a race that he believes is the Aryans, the true gods, the true owners of this realm, you can't dismiss that stuff lightly. There were 60 million people that died as a result of World War II. You look at even a fringe group like the NOI, and as lunatic as they are, they believe that their race was created separately. You look at Islam.
Everyone believes,
The Norse gods.
right?
How are we all wrong? How is it all simple legend, lore? Doesn't any of this have any roots in reality, or are we just all making up crap? Let me tell you something. As a point of historical fact, people in ancient times did not tell stories the way we tell stories today. It didn't happen. Stories then were a means of communication, were a means of retaining and conveying information and history. It was put in story form the same way we remember things with a song, because it's easier to remember that way. If you've got a story and you can remember the story in a certain way, you're going to remember that story. We all know the story of the Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Tough to forget, because we've had it hammered into us, and it's got a story. Well, that is the way information was conveyed. There was no written language.
The New Testament was, as a template or as an outline when they were writing, they used the creeds.
Exactly.
The earlier creeds that were verbally passed down, and they would take the creeds and then elaborate upon them.
And my point is that if you've got educators, instructors in history, in anthropology, what have you, who are merely, or even in mythology, who are dismissing, and I've read so many mythology books, and the one that, the big one, I forget her name. It's gone, completely gone. See, she didn't put her name in story form. Otherwise, I'd have remembered it.
Right.
That dismiss all of this because they're just made up crap. Well, how can you call yourself a student of history and dismiss the very cultures and methodologies that were utilized by the ancients? That's stupid.
Well, we condescend to the ancients. While we think it's wonderful if we discover something, and by digging, we get all excited when we find some amazing artifact. But when we read that artifact, it might say something we think is stupid, or we know by our science today that's impossible. So everybody wants to protect the scrolls of the Sumerians, which I found is 18,000. They've only read like 20 or 30% of them.
Scrolls.
Well, the clay.
So you mean the tablets?
The clay tablets,
cuneiform.
Yeah. And so while they're protected with a vengeance, they don't believe them. And yet what's interesting is most of these tablets found are of daily life and daily business transactions.
That's my understanding.
Now, they believe those without question. They'll believe the business transactions because that's mathematics. A plus, how many corn.
Or when they start dealing with things they don't understand, all of a sudden it's hokum.
So when they show pictures of a winged character, which always means flight, they just simply say that's an anthropomorphical god. In other words, they dream up this god in their mind, and they give him a form, and they give him wings, or chevron, which means flight. But we never stop and say to ourselves,
did something happen?
They're
actually
depicting what they saw in the best way they can.
And why is it every ancient society is doing this?
Well, no, look at it this way. Suppose something happened. There was a nuclear holocaust, blew the surface of the earth clean, except for
Logan's Run.
This little trove of survivors on a distant rock someplace, and 1,000 years pass by, 2,000 years pass by, and they start exploring, and they come across like NORAD. Under the ground, everybody was buried, but all the crap was intact.
Right.
What would they think?
They wouldn't know what to think.
I mean, they would see images of planes, rockets, jets, stuff on the wall. These machines that have lights, if they get power back to them. My whole point is that they would be removed from what we take for granted,
right? But
and knew as a reality.
Today, the skeptics of, for instance, an ancient aliens type theory, is that there's no equipment left behind. Whereas in your story you just told us, we found images of planes, or maybe we found planes.
They found plenty of equipment back then that they don't.
We found no working mechanisms that we can say, hey, this is futuristic for the time. We just find evidences of them being used. Like we'll find rocks that have been, this is the only thing, fused together by some kind of an apparatus that heats it to thousands of degrees to fuse these rocks together. We know that we can achieve that with certain types of lasers today, or we can achieve that by certain types of energy applied. But we know that in those days, there's no way you could have done that. Or cutting a 100,000 pound rock out of the cliff with an absolutely mirror finish on back. and there's no way to do that.
Well, I think we've both have come to the understanding. I've read accounts myself that they have been able to melt rock and pour it like a molten mixture into wherever they needed to pour it into. I've heard this more than once. I've seen papers on it. Of course, lost in that is how they exactly were able to do that.
Right.
But that they were able to do it seems to be, without question. I mean, because they've got the rocks left behind.
Right.
So, that there's stuff back there that we don't understand how it came to be, what's going on, sure. There's the Baghdad battery that goes back to antiquity. There's the calculator. I was trying to find it. It's all
Rome?
rusted. And,
The oldest computer?
yeah. Is that the one? Well, I mean, that's not the one because
No.
that's cleaned up. But yeah, that goes back
clear?
2,000 years or more.
It goes back to the Bronze Age, but they say that the gearing in it is beyond Bronze Age. It was used to chart astrological.
So, I mean, there's stuff out there that clearly it's a mystery to us today.
Mm-hmm.
The little images of airplanes that you can find back in, Sumerian times.
Egyptian.
Or Egyptian.
Yeah.
We can say, they were making an image of a bird or what. Fine. I'm not going to beat that to death. I suppose eventually we'll find out one way or another. What I do believe is coming, however, is this paradigm shift. I think that what Christians have been taught is a distraction. It is a bluff. It's the same thing that we discussed with ISIS, where we've got the boogeyman, bad ISIS people over here, the good Muslims are over here, and they're able to get into all facets of our life and our government and our economy and our schools and everything else because they're the good ones. We'll give them a pass because the bad ones over here we've got our eye on. And meanwhile, Christianity is looking at this particular end game popularized by Tim LaHaye of the rapture and Left Behind and all this stuff. And so we're not seeing what's actually going on over here. And we're being taken for a ride. And that's why we would elect Barack Obama.
Well, that's why Orthodox Christianity basically serves as the curtain behind in the Wizard of Oz. It's
to a large degree they are useful idiots. As
they are
Lenin
they are the
said.
curtain that is hiding the person working the machine.
So if this is going on,
machine.
is anyone who's listening to this podcast going to believe a word we say? Will anyone who's listening to this podcast even do an ounce worth of research to prove or disprove what we're saying, or will we just be rebuffed? See, that's the thing I would like to know.
We'll find out.
Are we just Are we just droning? Are we being clicked off because what we're saying is part of the kook brigade, or are people actually going to take a look? I came across the Hyros Gamos as a holy ceremony through the research of doing my book on marrying the mortal with the immortal, as outlined in Genesis chapter 6. I came across this law firm brokerage long after I'd done the research. Now, you can say that it's just named the Hyros Gamos, but here's the deal. Of all the names you can pick, why would you pick one that marries the immortal with the mortal as we're slipping into this new paradigm? Could it be a level of conditioning so that we can all become comfortable
With the idea.
with this idea that one of these days these hybrids are going to announce who they are, that they are in control, that they've in fact been in control for a while, and now the pretense is dropped because they no longer need to have it. And we are
cumbersome.
in the new age. The old age is gone. And all these Christians are going to sit here, and let me tell you something else. I feel that this is going to be presaged by probably the fall of Israel. And I know that's a provocative thing to say because according to Christian lore of the John Hagee type, Israel can't fall until Armageddon is there and the end of the age.
Well, they have no understanding.
And Christ comes back.
They have no understanding of the fact that modern day Israel is
But I think
not
Israel
what
will
was being
fall,
talked about in the,
will be
in the
taken
New Testament
out,
or
and
the
they
Old
will
Testament.
find themselves in the diaspora yet again.
Because, as we all know, modern day Israel is based on an atheistic view. And whenever we talk about what the Bible says about Israel, it's always a monotheist rule.
Yeah, well, okay, and yes, from the Old Testament and the covenants. But when I'm talking about Christianity today,
Right.
and where they think they're going with this, and why they would dismiss the Nephilim and they'd adhere themselves to the sons of Seth theory and all this other stuff, this orthodox, rapture and dispensationalist crap. If Israel were to fall and just go away,
Which it very
so
well
too
can do.
goes dispensationalism, the rapture,
Yes.
the whole tribulation thing is all gone because the legs that it's standing on are no longer there, and because
Until next time.
Well, no, but next time would have to be a new contrivance altogether. I don't know how long this paradigm shift is going to take, and I don't know how long this age will last. This is the conclusions I've come to doing my research. What contemporary Orthodox Christianity is teaching about the end of the age is absolutely wrong. It is built upon...
What's the point of a human being?
What is the point of a human being?
A human being, yeah.
I mean, why are we
Well,
here?
see, what Christianity teaches is that there's an end time which everything will be destroyed, which I understand. And I'm sure that time will eventually come.
Well, you've got to ask yourself the question of why hasn't it already come? If Christ has the authority that he says was given to him, why isn't he using it?
Because the day or the hour, no one knows.
No, that's BS. There's a reason.
My point I'm trying to make is that what is the purpose of a human being?
Well, when you find out, let me know.
Well, if you think about it, we all enter this world. We're sentient creatures.
Some of us.
And we grow and we learn, and a lot of us believe in a God, and we eventually grow old and we die, and we leave this plane of existence. So what is the purpose and the point of being a human being? Everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon and believe they're in the end times because they don't have to deal with this, quote, crap for very much longer, and Jesus will return and set up his kingdom, and they all look forward to that time, and they dance and they get excited and so forth. But what is the purpose of being a human being? Why were we put into this form in the first place?
In this era, in this age, we are to be lights of God to one another.
Right. So I think
that was different than the age that preceded it.
I don't like the idea that we want this world to end and destroy it, be destroyed, so that we can have our cake in heaven. There's life to be born, and I don't know how that works. Does it pre-exist the container it's coming into, a newborn baby?
I believe it does.
I think it does. But there's a purpose to life in the physical realm that I don't think any of us really understand. And I'm having my opportunity at this, and I want others to have their opportunity
Well, and that's
at
the
this.
thing that just really bedevils me, is that you've got all of these Christians and Orthodox fundamentalist evangelicalism who are just hanging on to this rapture theory. And 20 years ago we used to see the bumper stickers, caution, in case of rapture this car will be unmanned. And it's like, funny, the car crashed into a bunch of people and kills them because you got your little ride out of here. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Yeah, it's always been a meism idea.
It's a meism faith.
It is.
But not only that, we're on this earth on average.
I can remember 20 years ago.
70, 80 years, and we'll die.
I can remember 20 years ago, pastors telling people to go into debt as much as they could, because when the rapture happened, it would throw the world economy into turmoil.
Well, not only that, but, hell, they can't really send collections after you in heaven.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like...
You care what your credit rating is.
You just want to slap your forehead. Are you really that stupid?
So, yeah, I do believe there's a paradigm shift coming. I think that's what's really coming. I think that we, by and large, as Christians, are completely unaware. I think that most people will embrace it because there will be perks.
No, it's going to look better.
Well, it'll look better, but it'll also look worse. Understand that the main thrust of this shift is to supplant Creator God Almighty.
I agree.
And that means to supplant Creator God Almighty, you have to get rid of his emissaries here. Otherwise, it all falls apart. And we probably need to wrap this up because we've gone long. But what I want to get with this when we entertain this subject later is what this paradigm shift is going to look like and how I think it's going to eventually wind up. Why is Christ not back? If he should be, why isn't he here? You know, if all authority is given to him on earth and under the earth, and where is he? Well, I think I've got what I believe is the answer. That doesn't necessarily make me happy, but I do have, I think, the answer.
Well,
and
sounds like
it has a lot to do with this shift in what's coming. And why, don't run yourself up into credit hell just yet. You might want to hang on and be a little wise with your funds.
You mean we might still be here for a while?
I don't think we're going anywhere for a while.
Well, even if orthodoxy is correct with the whole...
You know what? I have a better chance of winning $1 billion in the lottery.
I agree. But even if orthodoxy is correct, for those of you that are Christians out there listening, every generation from the time this has been told, from the very first time, has thought, it can't get any worse. We're the last generation. Yeah. Christ is going to return. And in the end...
It always gets worse.
It's
always another generation.
In the end, the simple fact is,
son of a bitch,
you are in your end time. Whether Christ returns now or 10,000 years from now doesn't matter. You are in your end time because you won't be here to see it. So what are you doing with your time?
I think that's the most important point.
Yep, it is.
Is what do we do with the time that we've been given while we're here?
Well, for right now, this time has ended.
Okay.
Yes, it has.
So we will conclude this fascinating topic on the Nephilim. There's more to come. This is one of those topics, as I said earlier, we're going to have to be revisiting from time to time because it does have a lot to say about where we're coming and where we're going and the whole angels and aliens and demons and UFOs things as well.
Yes.
Which is right up across the Cosmos Alley. So, for
Lou Rogers,
Mark Wilson,
I am your host, Chase Rockwell, saying so long until the next time you find yourself across the cosmos.
Send any questions or comments to us via email at info@acrossthecosmos.com. Also, visit us on the web at www.acrossthecosmos.com for show updates, news, and other important information. No part of this podcast may be used without the express written permission from the staff of Across the Cosmos. Across the Cosmos is a production of Omite Corporation. Copyright 2015.